we're going to start with texturing and surfacing. This is going to cover only texturing as like using Substance Painter and some of the basics of how texturing actually works, like in a computer, very briefly. And it's not going to cover geometry or UV unwrapping, which are the two things that happen prior. Geometry is when you model. UV unwrapping is when you take that model and you project it flat. You don't need a lot of prior knowledge of the two to do this, but let's see. So what we're going to go over. First, we're going to go over what are textures, some brief stuff that you should take into account before you texture, texture types, some tips and tricks, some more vocabulary between the difference between textures and shaders, and then we're going to do something together. And I'm going to show you a demonstration in Substance Painter, which is free for students. So what are textures? Textures are 2D images that are projected onto your model using your UV map. So after you cut it out, you lay it flat. Textures specifically are just the images that are created to do that. Each texture itself represents one specific attribute. So we'll go over that later, but it's like you have a base color texture, you'll have a roughness texture. And each one of those will control one specific parameter. Altogether, they're usually referred to as like a material. So material is a collection of several textures. Before you texture, some things to take into account. First, no overlapping or duplicated geometry. So you want stuff that you don't want two faces that are right on top of each other. They'll usually end up making a weird glitch. When you UV unwrap, this is a good example of that. For those of you who don't know what that means, you'll take this model right here and you'll cut it up in your program. There's several different ways to do it depending on the program, Maya, Blender, what have you. It gets projected flat thanks to the computer onto a 2D image. And then you add your texture into those areas. And when you bring it back with the texture, it'll look like that. And then last thing is making sure all your normals are facing a correct direction. So really briefly, geometry lesson is, so you have faces, that's what geometry is made up of. And your face has an up direction and a down direction. Your normal is the up direction. Think normal as in like physics, like normal force. It's the force against pushing on the surface of something. And so when you have certain programs will render both sides of the plane exactly the same, and most will render the back side of the plane as transparent. So you can get a lot of weird glitches as to like, you'll be like, why is my thing half transparent? Why can I see the inside and not the outside? Because your normals are flipped. And so it's just really simple, making sure that all the planes are facing the right direction. And depending on, again, what program you use, you can just click a show which direction they're facing, and it'll either turn like right direction green, bad direction red. Like, so different texture types. And this is just vocab. We're gonna upload this, both the recording of this and the actual slideshow to our drive. Albedo, base color, and diffuse. They're technically different things, but they're all the same thing. That's the RGB map for color. So if you see that, that's what the color is. Roughness is a grayscale for reflective glossiness. This is just, I'm going to go over most of these afterwards. Normal is for artificial detail and displacement. Height is grayscale for artificial detail and displacement. Emissive is an RGB map for glowing colors. Subsurface scattering is an RGB map for deciding whether light is scattered underneath the model. Metallic is what it says on the box. Opacity is a grayscale map for transparency. And ambient occlusion is a grayscale map that mimics corner shadows. So we'll go over a couple of the most common ones really quickly. Base color, as it says on the box, is the RGB, so red, green, blue, map that adds your color to the model. It's used in almost every kind of material, shader, what have you. On the left is an example of a base color only material applied onto a 3D model of a house. On the right, you can see how that applies specifically to the UV map. And then the photo on the right shows, again, that's all just using one texture map, and that's base color. Everything in there is hand painted to give the illusion of having more depth and detail than there actually is. So you can go a long way with this. Just the one. Roughness is a grayscale map that represents reflectivity and glossiness. A black value or 0 represents something super glossy, and a white value of 1 represents something super matte, which you can see in the picture up above. This is not the same as glossiness or specular. If like you're in like Maya and it's like, oh, ask for a glossiness map. They're two different things. A lot of these have almost the same name, but not quite. And some of them are different, some of them aren't. Like albedo, base color, and diffuse are all so close to each other that realistically, if you use one for the other, nobody's going to notice. If you use a roughness map for a glossy map, it's going to be inverted, because where the roughness is super glossy is 0 on a roughness map, 0 is super matte on a glossiness map. They're opposites of each other. So you got to pay a little bit more attention when it comes to this stuff. But this is how you get like your basic reflectivity. So like if you're doing something like you're trying to make something look wet, or you're trying to make the difference between like tile and wood. There's actually a pretty good example of it here. And how you can adjust this value. So, and then some real world actual things on that scale. So you can see like a mirror is obviously super glossy, and a plaster is not. Actually, I think this might be, I might have messed up, and this might be a glossiness map, because it's 1. Yeah, it is. I did mess up, but whatever. We'll fix that later. Metallic is a grayscale map that influences how metallic a material appears, like it says. 0 represents non-metallic, while 1 represents very metallic. Apparently, I cut that off. You can see a representation of that that's rendered in Unreal Engine, I think. And it doesn't change a whole lot, but it just kind of changes the way your colors are interpreted. Metallic doesn't change the reflectivity of it. That's still what roughness does. This just makes it look more like the way a metal looks as it tarnishes and such. Normal maps, this one's a really big one. This is an RGB map used to fake lighting for geometry that isn't there. So a very common thing, especially in video games and movies, is something can't, no render engine usually can handle like a gazillion polygons. And most of the time, if you're doing like a sculpt or something, or you make a model, odds are to get it to look the way you want it to, you're going to come in usually at probably close to over a couple 100,000, close to 1 million polygons. And if you're trying to bring that into Unreal or Unity, or render that in Blender or Arnold, it's going to take a long time. And so the common tactic is, with all the fancy math I don't understand, you can bring it into a program like Substance Painter, and you can have a low res version right here and your high res version, and it will take all that detail and bake it onto what is called a normal map, which is the blue thing on the right. Yeah, right. And that normal map is basically, each one of those colors represents a direction, up, down, left, or right. And when the computer casts a light particle to one specific area, it will check and see not only like the actual geometry, but then it'll check and see on the texture, like, should this be bounced a specific direction? So it not only will it add fake value, like it reacts with lighting and most other things. And the last line is kind of important because when you get into texturing, there are different ways of rendering normal maps. There's what's called DirectX and OpenGL. That's really the only thing you guys need to know them for, is that they calculate these inversely. So whereas a light pink would be a certain direction in DirectX, it will be the opposite direction in OpenGL. So for example, Blender uses OpenGL and Unreal Engine uses DirectX. So if you bake something in Blender and you're not paying quite a bit of attention, you could end up having it inversed. And so everything that looks like it should be depressed all of a sudden looks like it's been embossed and popping out. It also just makes things way easier to deal with because a zillion polygons is annoying. Ambient Occlusion, this is a grayscale map that is baked onto each model, and it mimics contact shadows that most render engines either don't do or do poorly. And so on the left, you can see how it looks before and after having something like that applied. And it's very simple and very small, but it adds a lot to any one of your scenes. It's a huge thing for adding depth. Subsurface Scattering, this one's really cool, and I have no idea how it works. But it's a map that mimics lights being bounced through something semi-transparent. So I wrote underneath your skin. This is just a photo of an example of what actual subsurface scattering is in real life. And it's very expensive to render, but this will add that step of realism for skin, or I've seen people, I think you could use it on like something that's like really thin, you want to see through, like cloth that's like wavy and silky. And it basically just mimics when light bounces through something, like the inside of the volume. And these are some examples. So on the left, you have like a model that's like crystal. On the right, you have like another crystal skull. And then you can see the difference between skin with and without it enabled. And you can see it kind of just softens. I mean, especially for like the ears, that's a huge thing for getting it to look like the finger photo. But like you can see like around here, on the nose, the eyelids, the really thin parts of the skin, it just kind of softens the way the light is taken in. And that's a huge thing for getting skin to not look like it's made of plastic. Texturing tips, save often. That's a tip for everything. Use lots of reference materials. Textures are going to carry most, if not all, of your detail, because you can't do it with geometry. And if you did, it would be awful. So you need to pay close attention to what you're making. You know, cut corners, but don't really cut corners. And the last one is make sure your textures are always sizes to the power of 2. So 1096 by 1096, 2048 by 2048, 40 something by 40 something. I don't remember the last one. 124 by 124 if you're going really low res. And it's just look at lots and lots of reference material. There are people whose whole jobs are just making textures all day. They walk around, they take photos of dirty corners. And yeah, so textures versus shaders. So on the left, you see a couple materials. And as I said earlier, materials are just, a texture is one specific image. A shader or a material is a collection of those run through a process of different math to make it actually work. We're not talking about shaders because they are a lot of work, but different things can require different maps. So Like an unlit shader doesn't process anything that includes light. So anything that you would imagine actually needs light to work. So something to reflect, something to look metallic, something to look wet, that kind of stuff that needs to have light bouncing off of it to work won't work. So you wouldn't need to create any of that. You could create a base color and get away with it. Games like World of Warcraft and League of Legends use unlit shaders with just base color, and everything in there that looks like it's made of metal or looks like it's maybe a little glossy or made of cloth or something like that is just drawn on the old-fashioned like painting way. Physically based rendering, if you're looking to get a job in video games and movies, is a great buzzword to know, because that is what textures pretty much are these days. There's lots of other things you'll hear run around. Like if you use Maya or 3ds Max and you model and you open it up and you want to add a material, it'll be like, do you want like a blend thong, which is just a different type of shading. Physically based rendering, or PBR, requires base color, roughness, metallic, and normal, those 4 at a minimum to function. And it's everything. That's what all common materials are these days, because it's the most accurate to how things really are. Yeah, so now I'm gonna do a demonstration in Substance Painter, so you guys can start to look at what the program is like, and I can help you guys. Oh, this is Substance Designer. All right, so to get started, the first thing you do is you go to File, you go to Select, and then you pick wherever the model you download or want to use is. Mine's just on my desktop. The next important thing is document resolution. So you have to go through and pick the size. Again, these are all only to the power of 2 because computers. I'm going to pick 2048 because it doesn't make my computer lag. The next is that normal map format I talked about before between DirectX and OpenGL. It doesn't really matter which one we pick now because it's not going into anything else, but if it were, you'd have to know what it was that it was going into. So if this were going into Unreal or Unity, I think Unity is OpenGL. So if this were going into Unreal, it'd be DirectX. Unity would be OpenGL. Lots of other advanced stuff here that we're not going to worry about. And we're going to hit OK. Pat, where's my mouse? What weird pink thing? Oh, you have to, I think you have to give it a second. It's not, your textures aren't loading. Pink means, bright pink means your textures aren't loading. No, they should, you just give it a second. Your computer might be taking a hot sec to like load through them. Alrighty. The next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna go to bake. This is just for Substance so that they understand, the computer just understands what's going on. This is how you would bake a high poly to a low poly, but since we're not doing that, you can just come over here, hit bake, and then just hit bake again. It'll run through and it'll make a couple of different texture maps that it uses for itself. And then once you do all that setup, you're finally able to actually use Substance Painter. And so on the left, you have all the materials, which are, again, a selection of different textures. And you can just start throwing those on there to see how they look. So I think I'm going to grab whatever this one is. I like it. And down here on the right, they have exposed a bunch of different parameters that you can edit, get it to look how you want. and you can continue. You can see how it's using, if you come up here to the top right, you can look through each one of these single channels, so each color itself. And so this is the base color, this is the metallic, this is the roughness, this is the normal, which for some reason isn't loading. It's fine. This is the height, and this is the normal and the height, which is looking how it's supposed to. And when you combine all of those together in this PBR texture, you get something like this. And so Substance Painter is pretty much just like Photoshop, but for texturing. So if I want to do something fun, so I will throw on, the leaves don't work right. We're not going to do the leaves. They're a little too advanced. Where do you see glitter? Oh no, these are special brushes, those specific ones. So this one? All right, this is wood. So you can throw this on. So this is a wood texture for like a wood bust. So wood shows the seams really well as to where it's actually being UV unwrapped because they have to meet up. But cool part about what we can do here is, so say I want this base part at the bottom to be wood, and we'll do, I don't know, do I have a concrete in here? What's this leather look like? We'll do this leather texture for her hair, and this weird stone texture for the rest of her. So what we can do is this. You can right click on anything and you can do add a black mask. And all that does is makes it so that you can choose where things go. So I'll add a black mask to everything. Come over here, click on the paint tool, and then on the black mask, and then making sure that this color is white. You got to scroll down over here. I can come and I can start painting on all of the material. So it's normal, it's height, it's roughness, it's color, all of that. You can also come up over here and choose select by polygons. So I can select specific sections like this. And then by pressing the X key, I can turn things black. I can get rid of them from the selection. And by doing that and reordering these, I can remove the mask off of this one. And then paint, throw a mask onto this one. And now she looks the way I wanted her to, with the wood at the bottom, which actually I messed up. You can also select by this button up here does UV island. This one does the entire mesh, and these each ones do triangle select or square select. I'm doing UV islands, which I usually end up doing for rough out anyway, because they are very quick to select. And then I can come in and I can start changing up how I want specific sections to look. So if I want this to be a smaller stone, or if I want the wood on this to be a different color, I can make it purple. And make purple wood. And yeah, and so it's mostly just the same as if you were to get like a Photoshop tutorial. It's about just playing around and seeing what you like and seeing what you don't like. A lot of this is controlled by the masks as to where things will end up going. And you can start taking it off of areas. They also have, if you come up here, they have brushes, and you can start taking, you can click on those, and these will allow you to work things away in a more organic fashion. So you could add like damage that way. They also have this wonderful thing, and this is great for everyone who's like brand new. They have what are called smart materials, which are the second tab over here. And these automatically use a bunch of different maps and layers, their folders, to give you something that already looks kind of like what you want it to. So you could go copper, you could put on this bronze, corroded one, this one bone stylized, which I like. These are basically what you can do is I could create this thing again, pretty much, where you can add a fill layer, which is basic one color, and I'll make that bonish color. You can come down here and you can set all the parameters for it. So color, metallic, roughness, I'll bump up a little bit. And you can see how these are changed depending on what you want them to look like. Then I can come up here, I can add another fill, and I'll turn off everything other than color, and I'll turn it to darker red or brown. There's a lot of color theory that goes into this, just like painting. And then you can come up here to what's called smart masks. And these are using different types of generators and math and such to give you cool little effects. So now I can drag on smart mask, and it will add some of that wear and tear. And I could do it with soft damage, which will add damage to where the holes are. And you can do this as many times as you want, and it will continue to layer on top of each other in whatever fashion you want them to. And then you can come over here, you can blend the opacity of each layer down. So you can really fine tweak whatever you want. And I encourage you to just, most of what this program is just playing around and knowing the basic tools from here, and then just continuously throwing things at a wall and seeing what does look good and what doesn't. I can add that, and then you can come over here and you can click on the, if you click on the color, you get the attributes for the actual layer and the material. And if you click on the mask, you come down here and you can look at all of the different attributes for the mask. So I can edit how heavy I want this dirt to come up, or I come over here and then go to the mask editor. I can edit how much damage I want to be done. And yeah, it's just a lot of playing around, pretty much. And so you can get something kind of similar to how the bone looked without a huge amount of work. A lot of those materials are very simple. Yeah. Any questions? Yes, probably. I've never seen the error that you got. Without Googling it, it gives me the first, my first inclination is that it's something to do with your computer. Just because your computer is a little older now and this program is resource heavy. Yeah. So once you get to Studio next year, yeah, you can use this. Yeah, because I thought it was something like that was wrong with it. Free? No, it's not because it's not because it's free. Actually, the free version they give you is the full version. I don't think they put any paywall locks behind it. You can renew the educational license every year. Yes. Yeah, that's pretty much it for texturing. It's a lot of vocab, a lot of knowing what each specific thing does, and then going in and messing with it for yourself. There's a lot of tutorials for how you want to do very specific things. If you want to learn how to make glass, or you want to learn how to do stone, or if you want to learn how to make textures from images, or if you want to learn how to make textures from nothing, because you can do that too. You can make textures procedurally. And I think the last thing I'll cover is just exporting. You can go here, file, export textures, pick the location, and then I usually go for document channels, normal, and no alpha. So that just basically translates to it will export everything. And then you can also choose your texture size. So if you working with a high texture size like 8K, 4K, gets really expensive on your computer and gets really annoying because it'll start to lag. And so you can work on it in whatever size you want. And then at the very end, you can let it upscale it for you and export it. So that way you don't have to wait every time you make a minor change. And then you can just hit export. It'll go, and then you're done. And then you can bring these maps into wherever you want. Now, let me open this up. And I can show you what some of these look like. So for what we just made, this is what the base color looks like. This is the height. This is the metallic because we had no metallic. This is the ambient occlusion. This is the normal. This is the other normal. And this is the roughness, as I kept all the roughness the same. And you can see how for like certain specific things, these are now getting into other models of mine that I've accidentally exported to this spot. You can see how you can almost kind of make out a little bit of what the model based on it. But it basically, this program does all the guesswork for you of like, oh, I have, I put the UV island over here, because alternatively, if you have a program like Photoshop, this can show you the 2D and the 3D version of everything. So on the right is your UV unwrap with all of the fun stuff applied to it, and on the left is the 3D model. If you had something like Photoshop, you could import a model like this, and then basically you'd come in and you'd start painting over it like this. And you wouldn't get the 3D model on the right. You'd have to, unless they've changed it from last time I worked with it. And that's a very old-fashioned way of doing things. So like Unreal Engine, not Unreal Engine, World of Warcraft, this is how they do stuff, is you paint on it by hand. But the fun part about Substance Painter is that it's a two-way system. So you can do paint on her or paint on the UV. And yeah, that's about it, unless anybody has anything else. Any questions? What's up?
Character, like how do you get the texture to not be like the ones you show? Like you know how you show the web like the more dusty, rusty texture.
Mm-hmm.
What if you from like a character? You needed to use like colors, maybe shading.
Yeah, you'd come in here and you it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something where you want it to be like look like it's painterly and it was hand painted, you'd have to come in here with a like a drawing tablet and paint on it the kind of way I am doing right now, where you just pick a color and then you draw, and then you pick another color and then you draw. Or alternatively, this isn't limited to just photorealistic, so I can show you guys. I can show you guys, since this is on my home computer, this is a smart material I have for making things look a little more stylized. You can get gradients, you can get things that look, you can get things that look not necessarily super, yeah, super realistic. You drag on this. This is another good option. And stylized texturing and texturing for characters is its own thing, because a lot of that comes down to things like shaders, and also having an eye for how stylized textures are handled. But with anything like that, as it comes with increasing complexity, comes with increasing what you need to focus on. So you could also, like, they have skin face here, so I'll just throw this on, and this is just like a basic skin material. You could obviously get it to look more like a human by painting on the different color zones of the face and different undertones for the skin, painting on some veins and then lowering their opacity and that kind of stuff. But this is something like super quick and super basic. It looks kind of plasticky because I don't have subsurface scattering on, but it's not limited to just photorealism, and it's not limited to just hard surface, hard things. You can do plenty of organic stuff in here. Yeah. Anything else? Cash money. Anything from the people in Discord?
I'm here, but I enjoyed it. I learned more about subsurface scattering and that it's very confusing. So
Yes.
thank you for that.
Subsurface scattering is very confusing, but it's a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
Turn it on if I can.
I want to see where I could use it though, even beyond just like skin, I guess.
Skin is fun. Glass or something transparent. It
Okay.
just makes things look. It's just like a cool map. I think I can do it here. I do not remember how to do subsurface scattering on this program.
It's all good.
Yeah, I mean it's just a cool thing to have. It's a cool thing to do.
I'll try with glass. It sounds interesting.
It is. It's a lot of fun. I know people who've used it on like crystals and stuff like that, because it gets that like kind of like fogginess that you get inside, like if you were to hold up like a real actual rock to the light.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know why it's not working. Let me see if it works in iRay. Also, this has like a built-in render engine. I wouldn't recommend it using it for much, but yes, it's got a wonderful HDRI that I usually always get rid of. I hate how it looks. Huh. I wonder why it's not scattering. All right, well, I do not know why that's not working.
So, subsurface scattering. I actually worked with that a lot for doing see-through plastic and silicone.
Uh-huh.
It
Okay.
the way it works is calculating the distance that the light is traveling through the object, and the deeper it goes, the thicker it is. Like imagine you have yeah, like either like a glass statue. So like the deeper that the light goes, the darker it's going to get. So the edges will be very lightly colored, like green and pretty see-through, but then the deeper it goes, it's going to look more solid and darker green. And that calculating the distance takes, in a 3D space for one tiny object actually does take up a lot more power than a lot of just like ray tracing. And
Thank you.
yeah, so different substances I know that work like that are human skin. So like if you hold a flashlight up to your hand, you can like see kind of through your hand. Um, fish, silicone, uh, plastic that is supposed to be kind of translucent, uh, like old game controllers or something. Uh, yeah, a lot of like crystals or glass. I guess that's what those are. I wanted to say ceramic because I'm thinking like little statues, but I guess that's not really ceramic, just delicate.
Like porcelain?
No, porcelain would be pretty solid. It's just very reflective. Um, no matter what program you're using, I don't think they have Substance yet, but um, I know like they have 3D Studio Max, Maya, Houdini, Cinema 4D, I think. MoGraph Plus on YouTube has this thing called the Dragon Shader, and they go through that with a lot of different programs and different renderers. Let me see if I can get a link up fast.
Alrighty. Did she lag up? Are you up there too? Denise?
I'm just gonna see if I can find a link, but
All right.
I'm done for now.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? There's a fire alarm.
Oh,
What?
What's that? Yeah. It's just a fire alarm. Don't worry about it. All right. If nobody's got any other questions, then I'm going to call this done.